You can call me a hopeless gamer or a Palworld romantic, but I speak for at least 300,000 people when I say that Palworld has infinite potential. In the last 10 years or so alone, I've experienced a fair share of early access games that turned out to be absolute gems and developed their own cult-like followings that give me the confidence to believe Palworld is well on its way to something unmatched. Terraria, Kenshi, Risk of Rain 2. Three games that have shown how simple ideas can evolve into unimaginable products from their early access releases. The difference in complexity between initial launch and official release for these three games is something any developer could use as a reference on how to make a good game great. Ark Survival, Rust, RimWorld. Three games I have almost no experience with myself, but I recognize share similarities to Palworld from the survival game early access success story lens. And if we're keeping it real here, from the standpoint of non-early access Goliaths, Minecraft, Pokemon, and even Fortnite, the three parents of Palworld per se. And I think we can all agree that without the existence of these three games, Palworld may have not ever even been thought of. Now, we can talk about how the developers at Pocket Pair use some of these games as the blueprint for Palworld all day, but I'm not that interested in focusing on where we came from. I want to talk about where we might be going. If you've never heard of Terraria, you're welcome. Terraria is a 2D open-world survival craft sandbox game officially released back in 2011. And I know I said early access earlier, but I want to get this one out of the way first because although 2011 was considered its official release, the state of the game has been changed so drastically between 2011 and the final major update in 2020 that it's akin to an early access timeline. That aside, the similarities between Terraria and Palworld are more along the lines of their survival aspects: building, preparation for intense boss battles, and the unique experience of jumping between serene gameplay and intense combat. If I were to use Terraria as a blueprint alone, I think Palworld would benefit from adopting Terraria's large variety of base building structures, random events, and more unique boss experiences within the towers themselves. There are a lot more parallels I could draw, but I really want to put an emphasis on how Palworld feels very similar to the first time I played Terraria way back in the early 2010s, where the core gameplay loop was already fleshed out, but there was a lot of room for complexity. By 2022, Terraria sold 44 million copies. The fact that Palworld has already done more than half these numbers in a little over 1 month really speaks to its potential to be as much as a long-term staple. Now, Kenshi, I expect to be the least known title I mentioned today. At $30, it is another overwhelmingly positive reviewed open world sandbox survival game that really sticks out as its own experience within the genre. Please keep in mind that Kenshi was developed by a single person up until its early access release in 2013. It took 5 years of development for it to be fully released in 2018, and the changelog from 0 to 1.0 is yet again so steep, no one could have imagined the game becoming as complex and unique as it is today. The major aspects of Kenshi that I can relate to Palworld are the harshness of survival and the impact AI have on the overall experience. Unlike Terraria, Kenshi presents a world that was already quote-unquote living prior to your character creation. There are already inhabitants in the world of Kenshi who have their own agenda and ways of life. You, the main character, have to create a means of survival for yourself and recruit inhabitants of the world to aid you in building your own potential empire. Sound familiar? In Kenshi, everything and everyone is out to get you, but you can finesse your way from being a washed up no-name to essentially being the king of the island. World. Difficulty-wise, I think Palworld could really learn a thing or two about unforgiveness or the harsh reality of the world. So far, wild pals, harsh biomes, and random base raids do a decent job of keeping the game difficult, but I can see a future where the game is a bit more unforgiving, and open world decisions can have more long-lasting consequences if not approached with caution. As a simple example, you can literally lose your limbs in Kenshi if you're not too careful, and that can change your entire playthrough drastically. I don't feel like there's anything in Palworld that has game-changing consequences right now. The most punishing situation I've experienced is when the base raids start to scale and wipe out my entire base. It may be a little annoying and create a minor inconvenience to rebuild a structure or two, but imagine if after being wiped by a raid, the enemies looted half of your resources or even worse. They take you or your pals as prisoners back to their camp, forcing your hand in retrieving your prized pals. Wouldn't that be a fun loot? And as great as a game Kenshi is, I still consider it a hidden gem. It sold over 1 million copies, and yet its development cycle has proven to be considerably more complex than what Palworld currently has to offer, which continues to give me faith that with how many resources Pocket Pair has amounted, they can really turn this game up. The latest of my 3 big inspirations for Palworld's potential future is Risk of Rain 2. Unlike Terraria and Kenshi, Risk of Rain 2 has almost nothing in common with Palworld. It's another overwhelmingly positive reviewed, but third-person shooter action roguelike game. Released in early access in 2019, I honestly am appalled by how much the game developed in 1 year, having fully released in 2020. The list may not look very long, but the content is heavy. From new characters, new maps, game-changing items, new challenges, and even the incorporation of a final boss to give the game a sense of conclusion from what used to be an open-ended endless loop. Risk of Rain 2 is the pinnacle of what can happen to a game in early access, and I think about it every day when I'm recommitting myself to Palworld as a long-term experience. If Palworld were to get half the treatment Risk of Rain 2 got in early access, considering its breakout success, this game will forever be a world-class staple in gaming history. Looking at Palworld's roadmap alone, PvP is going to be completely game-changing. I could talk about this as its own video. New raid bosses are going to give all playstyles more motivation to keep developing their teams and have something to look forward to post-tower completion. The POW Arena is something I can't even imagine, just because I can't believe that it will only be a simple AI numbers game forever. I think it has the potential to evolve into more complex decision-making combat. And then just the improvements to building. New islands, POWs, bosses, and technologies are all great hopes for the unimaginable. If Pocket Pair were to pull off this entire roadmap in a year's time like Risk of Rain 2, it's needless to say that we are essentially playing the MS Paint version of Palworld, and one day we'll be working with Photoshop. But hopium aside, Risk of Rain 2 sold over 4 million units on the PC side by 2021, and although it was the sequel to an already successful game that provided most of the gameplay loop prior to being translated to 3D, I still think it shines a light on the idea of there being hope with successful early access games. We've been told Pocket Pair is a small studio that had no expectation to achieve this much success, but with the amount of money they have rolling in, I'm expecting Palworld to reach gameplay experience heights that no one could have ever imagined. And earlier I mentioned 3 games I know little about, but I want to highlight just how impactful their cult followings are in creating unique gameplay experiences and how I think Palworld is on its way to something similar. Ark Survival was one of the most referenced games I've seen to Palworld when I first started. People were saying Palworld was basically Ark but with Pokemon, and although I've never played Ark for an extended period due to optimization issues, I can say that the menus in Palworld are definitely directly inspired as well as the technology concepts. But the PAL approach, specifically the outlook of PALs being workers or slaves, is where the line starts to get drawn. What I do find very interesting about Ark is that it's definitely a successful title. Having sold many copies and having a large catalog of expansions or spin-offs, I've never actually seen Ark in the mainstream of gaming. It always felt like this back alley community that were extremely dedicated to Ark as a niche. Even today, just typing Ark Survival into YouTube will populate thousands of videos that get millions of views, which truly speaks to its cult following and longevity as a successful franchise. I definitely get Ark as a face value appeal, but I can't really say I understand the game itself, and it's a shame because it's for sure within my taste palette. But entry into the community isn't as seamless as I need it to be, and I feel like Palworld simplified Ark in a way and created an easier lane for people interested in this kind of medium to get involved. The early on sale price of $27 and the familiar looking monsters may be responsible for that as well, but regardless, I think the complexity of Ark is more reason to believe in Palworld's potential long term. Now, Rust gives me the most hope for the future of Palworld's PvP and server potential. If you're like me and have never played Rust or don't know much about it, I highly suggest checking out this video of 3,000 players simulating Earth civilization in Rust. I plan to talk about Minecraft later, but I actually discovered this video a couple months before Palworld's release, and it blew my mind just how dedicated Rust community is to faction-based gameplay. There are multiple factions of full-time Rust players who document their experience all over YouTube. The most interesting to me are the organized base raids and their intensity of being so deeply immersed in a survival game that the PvP feels realistic.
Hit the guy on top. You can't peek for a while. Check you. Wall on the ground.
Oh fuck! I walled one. Bro, I hit my mouse on my keyboard, bro.
Bruh.
I haven't experienced anything like that since I was in high school, and I thought that corner of the internet had faded away. And when it comes to Palworld, I think one of the first things I noticed upon login was that we are immediately placed in guilds. This felt like a foreshadowing of unique faction-based gameplay. Imagine playing Palworld and competing with enemy factions for resources, right? Or challenging dungeons and outposts for progression, and using pals to wage all-out war on neighboring bases. Essentially, imagine a living competitive community within a single Palworld server, where the settings are beyond the current default hard presets, and every aspect of progression feels rewarding because the people in the server are all working hard to be the top factions. That's a Palworld I dream of. One that fills the empty ocean with new land masses to compensate for a larger player base, and the daily relaxed open world gameplay can be disrupted by an enemy player attracted to the same point of interest as you. That just sounds like fun to me, and I pray Palworld creates an opportunity to move in the direction of hardcore faction servers one day. So of the 3 games I know little about, RimWorld definitely sits at the top. I've really only watched the trailer and dug around discussion forums, but for a game with such a niche 2D aesthetic, man, it has done really good for itself. And its ability to maintain 20,000 daily players on Steam is extremely impressive. RimWorld really goes deep in the artificial intelligence department from what I've seen. The in-base NPCs can have personal conflict with one another, the hostile NPCs can be recruited similar to Kenshi, and the constant challenge of dealing with random events that affect the player's base I find to be extremely attractive. I brought this up before, but man, Palworld needs some weather. Like, I understand that some weather systems can be tedious to deal with and outright existing just to annoy the player, but weather affecting the base would really make for a great means of breaking up the monotony in the base. Now, weather aside, I do love Palworld's AI. I haven't experienced many games with AI that handle tasks, but there's something uniquely relaxing about watching pals work in the base. It is almost hypnotic even. And I can only imagine what the future of AI interactions look like. For example, if the pals got into fights with each other occasionally, that would be cool. If the pals showed signs of individual personality within the base, even if it were just text, I think that would be interesting. And when looking at RimWorld, which I'm honestly ashamed I haven't played yet, the constant evolving threats to the base really make for a great sense of surprise throughout the playthrough. Future plans aside, I think Palworld's current base raids are fairly impressive for this phase of development, because after around level 20, I never experienced the same raid type back to back, but I do think the future of Palworld would benefit from raids having more goals than just attacking all entities within a base, and instead had goals such as freeing pals, or stealing your resources, or even non-hostile raids where travelers, merchants, and black marketers visit your base to offer their selections. And I want to wrap things up by just pointing out how Palworld is essentially scratching an itch for adult lovers of Minecraft, Pokemon, and I'd even say Fortnite that I think no other game can. When I think about my Minecraft experience growing up, it transformed from building to exploring to trying themed servers such as Faction Wars, modded servers such as RLCraft, and even mini-game based experiences where all items attained were limited to a single instance, such as Hunger Games or King of the Hill. Imagine a world where modders and server administrators took Palworld to the same level. Faction Wars excite me the most, as I've mentioned them many times today, but even the uniqueness of a Palworld Hunger Games PvP experience where you find chests that have random pals or gear to defeat enemy players within a set time even sounds fun, because the pal aspect is unique to this experience. And I don't even want to get started with the Pokemon based potential. We already have 5 towers. Imagine an island that has a sequence of towers or NPC pal tamers who you must defeat to become the pal champion, and if you fail, you can always train in the nearby zone until your pals are strong enough to challenge it again. Or imagine a Palworld experience that allows us to change skills or order pals to use specific skills in combat without opening the main menu. There are just so many ways the Pokemon loop can be incorporated into the future of Palworld in a way that feels unique, considering Palworld has real-time combat opposed to turn-based. I think right now the legendaries placed in Palworld really capture that feeling of fighting powerful monsters in these hard to find areas. But imagine if there were legendaries that spawned randomly around the map based on certain conditions like nighttime or weather requirements, making the challenges of finding them or the hunting aspect of the game feel that much more rewarding. When I think about Fortnite, which I have almost no experience playing, I think Fortnite gives us a look at just how much better player combat could be. Fortnite is like an amalgamation of every anime and popular TV concept ever, and yet they've managed to make the combat mesh into their world seamlessly. Right now in Palworld, every melee weapon has the same swing animation, and I think that alone speaks to just how little depth combat has. I'm hoping for the best for Palworld. I see a very bright future of a game that scratches a very specific itch for a unique set of people. At 25 million sales in a little over a month, Occupair has captured the attention of an audience that is looking to scratch an itch that can't be scratched by any of the other games I mentioned today on their own. They did something right, and I just hope they continue to push Palworld into the realm of freedom and creativity that they've shown us they're capable of so far. It's your boy Lamar's. Thanks for watching. Peace.